A millionaire finds twins in front of his mansion. Years later, a taxi arrives. The heavy rain battered against the windows of William Mason's mansion as he trudged up the marble steps, his mind still consumed by corporate deals. A faint cry pierced through the storm's howl, stopping him in his tracks. There, sheltered beneath the portico, lay a wicker basket. Inside, two infants slumbered peacefully, their tiny hands clasped together. A blood-stained letter rested beside them, its edges damp from the rain. William's heart froze as his fingers traced a familiar engraving on a delicate silver bracelet wrapped around one baby's wrist, the same pattern his late wife had worn. The world seemed to stand still as memories he'd buried deep within came rushing back, threatening to shatter the walls he'd built around his heart. Hey everyone, before we dive into today's story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you find this content interesting, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to support the channel and never miss our upcoming exciting stories. Thank you all so much. William Mason hadn't always been the cold, calculating CEO of Mason Enterprises. 5 years ago, he was a different man, one who smiled, loved, and dreamed of a family. His wife, Elizabeth, had been his anchor, the warmth to his ambition. She was 6 months pregnant with their first child when tragedy struck on that rainy evening. The memories still haunted him, the screeching tires, the shattering glass, the horrifying silence that followed. A drunk driver had taken everything from him in an instant. Elizabeth and their unborn daughter were gone, leaving William alone with a void no amount of success could fill. He could still remember the last morning they spent together. Elizabeth had been radiant, her hands resting on her swollen belly as they discussed names for their daughter. "Grace," she'd said softly, "I want to name her Grace." William had kissed her then, promising her the world. Hours later, he was standing in a sterile hospital corridor, his world crumbling around him. Elizabeth's family had tried to help him through the grief. Her younger sister, Amanda, had been especially supportive, but William pushed everyone away. The pain was too raw, the memories too vivid. He threw himself into work, building Mason Enterprises from a promising startup into a corporate empire. Money became his obsession, success his only companion. The grand mansion he built on the outskirts of the city became his fortress of solitude. Every room was meticulously designed, every piece of furniture carefully selected, yet nothing could mask the emptiness that echoed through the halls. The nursery he and Elizabeth had planned remained locked, a time capsule of broken dreams. In the business world, William gained a reputation for being ruthless and brilliant. Board members feared his cold logic, competitors dreaded his strategic mind, the press dubbed him the Ice King of Wall Street, and he embraced the title. It was easier to be feared than to let anyone close enough to see the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. His personal assistant, Sarah, was the only person who glimpsed occasional moments of humanity in him. She'd been with the company since the beginning, hired by Elizabeth herself. Sometimes William caught her watching him with a mixture of concern and something else, a sadness he couldn't quite understand. But Sarah never crossed the professional boundary he'd established, never mentioned Elizabeth or the past. The photographs were all locked away in a safe, gathering dust alongside Elizabeth's jewelry and the ultrasound pictures of their unborn child. The only reminder he kept visible was a small silver bracelet on his desk, Elizabeth's favorite piece, engraved with an intricate pattern she'd designed herself. Some nights, when the silence became too heavy, he would trace the pattern with his fingers, remembering how it used to glint on her wrist as she gestured animatedly while talking. Elizabeth's family had distanced themselves over the years, understanding his need for space but never fully accepting it. Amanda, who had once been like a sister to him, eventually stopped trying to reach out. The last he'd heard, she had married someone named Michelle and moved away. He pretended not to care, but sometimes he found himself wondering about the family he could have had. The business became his entire world. Every decision was calculated, every move planned with precision. He expanded Mason Enterprises into new markets, acquired struggling companies, and transformed them into profitable ventures. The board praised his leadership, shareholders celebrated their returns, and William buried himself deeper in spreadsheets and contracts. His daily routine was a masterpiece of efficiency: wake up at 5 a.m., workout in his private gym, breakfast while reviewing market reports, meetings, deals, more meetings, late nights at the office, and finally return to an empty house that had never felt like home. Weekends were just extensions of weekdays, holidays were opportunities to catch up on work, and relationships were limited to business partnerships. The media occasionally tried to dig into his personal life, speculating about the mysterious CEO who never attended social events, never dated, never showed any interest in anything beyond his company's growth. Some stories came close to the truth, mentioning the tragedy that had shaped him, but William's lawyers were quick to shut down any detailed investigations. He had convinced himself that this was enough, that the empire he built could fill the void left by Elizabeth's death. The weight of his grief had transformed into a hard shell of ambition and control. In board meetings, he could silence a room with just a glance, his dark eyes carrying an intensity that made even the most confident executives uncomfortable. But in the quietest moments, usually late at night in his study, William would find himself staring at Elizabeth's bracelet, remembering her laugh, her dreams, her love for family. These were the moments when the facade cracked, when the mighty CEO allowed himself to feel the full weight of his loss. These were the moments he dreaded most, yet couldn't escape. The mansion's staff knew better than to disturb him during these times. They worked silently, maintaining the perfect order he demanded, disappearing like shadows when he passed through the halls. Only Sarah seemed to understand the significance of these moments, sometimes leaving a cup of his favorite tea outside his study door, just as Elizabeth used to do. Years had carved deep lines into William's face, aging him beyond his 38 years. His success came with a price: the whispers in corporate hallways, the pitying glances from those who remembered the man he used to be. Board members praised his business acumen, while privately wondering if he was capable of any human connection at all. The east wing of his mansion remained untouched, preserved exactly as Elizabeth had designed it. The nursery, painted in soft yellows and greens, stood as a silent testament to dreams that never materialized. Baby furniture, carefully chosen by Elizabeth, gathered dust beneath protective sheets. Sometimes late at night, William would stand in the doorway, unable to step inside but equally unable to let go. His connection to Amanda's family had once been the cornerstone of his life. Elizabeth's parents had treated him like a son, and Amanda had been the mischievous little sister he never had. Sunday dinners at their modest home had been filled with laughter, warmth, and the kind of love William had never known in his own troubled childhood. Elizabeth would tease him about his serious demeanor, while Amanda regaled everyone with stories from her art school adventures. The last family dinner had been just days before the accident. Elizabeth had proudly shown off the ultrasound pictures, and Amanda had presented them with a hand-painted mural for the nursery. "Every baby needs a bit of magic," she'd said, her eyes shining with excitement about becoming an aunt. The mural still hung in the locked nursery, its whimsical forest scene faded but intact. Amanda's marriage to Michelle had come as a surprise to everyone. It was a hasty ceremony, performed without family present shortly after Elizabeth's death. The few times William had seen Amanda afterward, she seemed changed, quieter, almost fearful. Her once vibrant artistic spirit appeared dimmed, but he had been too consumed by his own grief to notice the warning signs. Sarah, his assistant, had an uncanny resemblance to the sisters that William tried hard to ignore. The same graceful movements, the same intuitive understanding of his needs. He'd hired her on Elizabeth's recommendation, and sometimes he wondered if his wife had seen something in Sarah that he was still missing. Sarah kept a professional distance, but her eyes held secrets he never dared to explore. The corporate world became his refuge, a place where emotional detachment was an asset rather than a flaw. William built Mason Enterprises into a fortress of steel and glass, its 50 floors towering over the city like a monument to his loss. Every success felt hollow, every achievement overshadowed by the family photographs he could no longer bear to look at. His wealth grew exponentially, but the emptiness in his life expanded even faster. The business media celebrated his strategic brilliance, unaware that each acquisition, each merger, was just another attempt to fill an unfillable void. The Forbes profile dubbed him the Lonely Titan, a title that cut closer to the truth than they knew. Victor Goodman, his main rival on the board, often criticized what he called William's emotional bankruptcy. The older man represented the old guard of business, believing that William's detachment would eventually be his downfall. "A man who can't feel can't lead," Victor would say in board meetings, his words carrying a challenge William refused to acknowledge. Time passed in a blur of meetings, contracts, and solitary evenings in his study. William measured his life in quarterly reports and stock prices, ignoring the growing whispers about his isolation. The mansion's staff worked around his silences, maintaining the perfect order that had become both his comfort and his prison. Elizabeth's bracelet remained his only connection to the past, its silver surface worn smooth from years of unconscious touching. The pattern she had designed, an intricate weave of Celtic knots, represented the eternal nature of love, a concept William had locked away with his heart. He kept the bracelet in a desk drawer, taking it out only in his weakest moments. Sarah watched his descent into emotional isolation with growing concern. She had been there since the beginning, had watched him transform from a loving husband into a corporate automaton. The warmth that Elizabeth had nurtured in him seemed completely extinguished, replaced by an icy efficiency that both impressed and terrified those around him. The city's social elite had long since stopped inviting him to their gatherings. His rare appearances at mandatory social functions were marked by stilted conversations and early departures. Women who tried to breach his defenses eventually gave up, leaving him to his self-imposed solitude. The press speculated about his private life, but the truth was there was nothing to report. William Mason had stopped living when Elizabeth died. Legacy became his obsession. If he couldn't have the family he dreamed of, he would build something that would outlast him. Mason Enterprises expanded into new territories, its influence growing with each calculated move. William worked tirelessly, as if trying to outrun the memories that haunted his empty halls. But beneath the corporate success and carefully maintained facade, cracks were beginning to show. Sleepless nights became more frequent, the weight of solitude pressing heavier with each passing year. The mansion, for all its grandeur, felt more like a mausoleum than a home, a monument to everything he had lost and everything he had refused to let himself feel since that rainy night 5 years ago. The wicker basket sat on William's marble kitchen counter, its precious cargo still sleeping peacefully despite the storm raging outside. His hands trembled as he read the blood-stained letter again, the words burning into his mind. "I know you can give them what I cannot. Please protect them from him. The bracelet will remind you of your promise. A." The handwriting was disturbingly familiar, though shakier than he remembered. His eyes kept returning to the silver bracelet, identical to Elizabeth's, wrapped carefully around the girl's tiny wrist. The pattern caught the light, sending shadows dancing across the walls that reminded him of happier times. He picked up his phone several times, finger hovering over his lawyer's number, but something stopped him each time. The twins stirred, and the boy's eyes opened, dark eyes that seemed to peer straight through his carefully constructed walls. A soft whimper from his sister followed, and William found himself moving instinctively to comfort them. "I don't know what to do," he whispered to the empty kitchen. The mansion's silence, usually his comfort, felt oppressive. These babies needed warmth, love, care, everything he'd locked away after Elizabeth's death. His practical mind screamed at him to call social services to maintain the distance he'd worked so hard to build. But as he looked down at their innocent faces, memories flooded back, memories he'd suppressed for years. Elizabeth's joy when they discovered her pregnancy, her hands protectively cradling her belly, her dreams for their family. The bracelet caught the light again, and he could almost hear her voice. Family is everything, Will. Promise me you'll never forget that. Sarah arrived at dawn, letting herself in with her emergency key. She stopped dead in the doorway, taking in the scene before her William Mason, the infamous Ice King of Wall Street, awkwardly cradling 2 infants while surrounded by hastily purchased baby supplies from an all-night store. Mr. Mason, her voice carried a note of disbelief he'd never heard before. What's happened? William looked up, exhaustion evident in his features. They were left at the door. There's a letter. And this he nodded toward the bracelet, watching as recognition flickered across Sarah's face. Her reaction was subtle, a slight widening of the eyes, a barely perceptible intake of breath, but it caught William's attention. Before he could question it, one of the babies began to cry, and Sarah's professional instincts took over. Here, let me help, she said, efficiently organizing the chaos of bottles, diapers, and blankets. Her movements were practiced, natural, as if she'd done this countless times before. Another detail for William to file away for later consideration. The next few hours passed in a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and hushed conversations. Sarah proved invaluably knowledgeable about infant care, though William chose not to ask why. Instead, he found himself sharing the details of the previous night, the storm, the discovery, the letter, and most significantly, the bracelet. It can't be a coincidence, he said finally, watching as Sarah gently rocked the girl to sleep. That pattern. Elizabeth designed it herself. No one else could have replicated it. Sarah's expression remained carefully neutral. What are you thinking of doing, Mr. Mason? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. William moved to the window, watching as the storm finally began to break. The first rays of sunrise painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, reminding him of mornings with Elizabeth. I should call the authorities, he said quietly. That would be the logical thing to do. The responsible thing. He turned back to look at the sleeping infants. But something about this feels predetermined. Like Elizabeth is trying to tell me something. The memories William had suppressed for years came flooding back as he watched the twins sleep. His childhood in the state orphanage hadn't been filled with abuse or dramatic neglect. It was the quiet despair that had scarred him most deeply. The constant reminder that no one wanted you, that you were simply another file in an overcrowded system. He remembered the cold institutional walls, the rotating staff who tried their best but were too overwhelmed to offer a real connection. The way hope would rise with each potential adoption, only to be crushed when families chose younger children, or siblings who couldn't be separated, or babies without his difficult background. No one wants a boy who asks too many questions, the social workers would say, trying to soften the rejection with smiles that never reached their eyes. William had learned to stop asking questions, to stop hoping, to focus instead on survival and success. He'd buried those memories deep, using them as fuel for his relentless drive to prove everyone wrong. Now, looking at the twins, he could see himself in their vulnerability. The boy's determined grip on his sister's hand, even in sleep, spoke of an instinctive need to protect. The girl's occasional whimpers brought back echoes of nights spent comforting younger children in the orphanage, trying to create the sense of family they all desperately craved. Mr. Mason, Sarah's voice broke through his reverie. The board meeting starts in 2 hours. Should I reschedule? The question snapped him back to reality, to quarterly reports and shareholder expectations, to Victor's constant challenges and the corporate machine he'd built. But for the first time in years, those concerns felt hollow compared to the weight of the decision before him. No, he said finally, but I need you to stay with them. And Sarah, he paused, studying her face carefully. I need you to be honest with me. You know more about this situation than you're telling me, don't you? Sarah's expression remained professional, but something flickered in her eyes. "Mr. Mason, right now what these babies need is someone to care for them. The rest will come in time." The first night with the twins tested every ounce of patience and resourcefulness William possessed. Despite Sarah's help during the day, he insisted on handling the overnight care himself. Each cry pierced through his carefully constructed defenses, demanding immediate and unconditional response. He found himself pacing the mansion's halls, humming Elizabeth's favorite lullabies as he cradled first one baby, then the other. The boy he'd started thinking of him as Jack, though he tried not to attach names, yet was the more vocal of the two. His sister, whom he couldn't help calling Lily in his mind, was quieter but more persistent in her needs. Around 3 in the morning, exhausted and emotionally raw, William found himself in the locked east wing. Almost without conscious decision, he used the key he always carried and opened the nursery door. The air was stale, heavy with 5 years of preserved grief, but as he stepped inside with both babies in his arms, something shifted. Elizabeth's presence seemed to fill the room not as a ghost or memory, but as a guiding force. The hand-painted mural Amanda had created caught the moonlight, its whimsical forest scene coming alive with shadows and possibility. The rocking chair Elizabeth had chosen still waited patiently in the corner, and William found himself sinking into it, the twins cradled against his chest. "I don't know if I can do this," he whispered into the darkness. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to love again." The babies stirred but didn't wake, their tiny hands clutching his shirt. The girl's bracelet caught the moonlight, its pattern throwing familiar shadows on the wall. In that moment, surrounded by the remnants of his past dreams and the unexpected promise of a new future, William Mason made his decision. He would not let these children enter the system he'd escaped. He would not let them face the cold institutional walls, the rotating caregivers, the crushing weight of being unwanted. Whatever complications or consequences might come, whatever secrets Sarah was keeping, whatever connection existed between the bracelet and his past, he would face it all. As dawn approached, William remained in the rocking chair, holding the sleeping twins. For the first time since Elizabeth's death, the mansion's silence felt not like a prison, but like a cocoon of possibility. The nursery, so long a shrine to his grief, began to feel like what it was always meant to be a place of new beginnings. When Sarah arrived that morning, she found them there. If she was surprised to see William in the previously forbidden room, she didn't show it. Instead, she simply smiled a real smile that reached her eyes and said, "I'll have the lawyers start the adoption paperwork right away, Mr. Mason." William nodded, careful not to disturb the sleeping infants. "Sarah, I think it's time you told me everything you know about these children and their mother." Her smile faded slightly, but her voice remained steady. "Yes, sir, I believe it is. But first, let's get them properly settled. Some stories take time to tell correctly." The tension in Mason Enterprises' boardroom was palpable as William faced the assembled board members. His appearance had changed subtly in the weeks since the twins' arrival. His trademark, perfectly pressed suit slightly rumpled, a softer edge to his usually steely gaze. The morning's newspaper lay on the mahogany table, its headline glaring Ice King Thor's Mason's mysterious twins raise questions. "This is unprecedented," Victor Goodman's voice cut through the silence, his tone dripping with barely concealed contempt. "Our CEO, the face of Mason Enterprises, suddenly playing house with abandoned children? The shareholders are nervous, William. Your judgment is being questioned." William remained still, his fingers unconsciously tracing the edge of the newspaper. The photo showed him carrying the twins from his car to the mansion, their tiny faces mercifully obscured. Someone had been watching, waiting for this moment of vulnerability. "My personal life has never affected my leadership of this company," William stated calmly, though his heart raced. "In fact, this experience has opened my eyes to necessary changes in our corporate culture." The board members shifted uncomfortably as William stood, moving to the window that overlooked the city skyline. We've built an empire on efficiency and profit, but at what cost to our people? How many of our employees miss their children's first steps because of our inflexible policies?" Victor's laugh was sharp, dismissive. "Oh, please. Don't tell me a few weeks of playing daddy has turned you soft. This company wasn't built on sentiment." No, William turned, his voice carrying a new kind of authority, not the cold command of before, but something warmer, more compelling. It was built on innovation and vision. "And right now I'm proposing we innovate our approach to human capital." He laid out his plan: flexible working hours, improved parental leave, on-site childcare facilities. The numbers were solid research showing increased productivity, reduced turnover, enhanced loyalty. But Victor wasn't having it. "This is madness," he slammed his hand on the table. "First you take in strays, now you want to transform our corporate culture?" The William Mason I knew would never let emotion cloud his judgment like this. "Perhaps," William replied quietly, "it's time you knew a different William Mason." The battle lines were drawn as Victor rose from his seat, his face flushed with anger. "I move for a vote of no confidence. Clearly our CEO has lost his objectivity. These children have compromised his ability to lead." A murmur ran through the room. Some board members looked away, unable to meet William's gaze. Others sat straighter, sensing the gravity of the moment. William felt a familiar coldness creeping into his chest, the defensive wall he'd built over years of corporate warfare. But then his phone buzzed. A message from Sarah Jack took his first steps. "Lily's laughing. They're waiting for you." Attached was a photo of the twins, their faces bright with joy. The ice in his chest melted. "Before you vote." William's voice filled the room. "Let me remind you of something. 5 years ago, when I took over as CEO, this company was struggling. My cold leadership style, as you call it, was praised when it tripled our profits. Now that I'm suggesting we evolve, showing that I understand the human element of business, you question my judgment." He pulled up presentation slides, each one meticulously prepared. These aren't just feel-good policies. Companies with strong family support systems show increased productivity, better talent retention, and higher innovation rates. We're not just doing the right thing, we're securing our future. The data was compelling, but Victor wasn't finished. "And what about these mysterious children? The rumors about their origins? The questions about their mother? How long before this becomes a scandal that damages our reputation?" Victor's opposition grew more aggressive as media speculation intensified. Tabloids began running stories about the twins' mysterious appearance, linking William to various conspiracy theories. "Mason's secret family," screamed one headline. "Billionaire's hidden past exposed," claimed another. The board meeting dragged on, strategies and counter-strategies flying across the table. William maintained his composure, but inside his mind raced. He thought of the twins waiting at home, of the silver bracelet that connected past to present, of Elizabeth's dreams for their family. "The media attention will pass," William stated firmly. "What won't pass is our opportunity to lead by example, to show that success and humanity aren't mutually exclusive." Dr. Evelyn Harris, the board's most senior member, had remained silent throughout the debate. Now she leaned forward, her experienced eyes studying William intently. "I've known William for over a decade," she began, silencing Victor's next objection with a raised hand. "I watched him build this company with single-minded determination, but I also remember the man he was before tragedy struck, a man who understood that business success and human compassion could coexist." The room fell silent as Sarah suddenly appeared at the door, her face uncharacteristically urgent. She slipped William a note, and he felt his blood run cold as he read it. Someone had been asking questions about Amanda, about Michelle, about the night the twins arrived. Someone was digging into Elizabeth's accident. William's hands tightened on the note, but his voice remained steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have a choice to make. You can support a vision of corporate leadership that embraces both profitability and humanity, or you can cling to an outdated model that treats people as disposable resources. He paused, gathering his thoughts. These children haven't compromised my judgment, they've cleared it. They've reminded me of what Elizabeth always knew, that true success isn't measured solely by profit margins. Victor scoffed, but others were nodding thoughtfully. Dr. Harris smiled slightly, as if seeing something others missed. The vote that followed was close, but William's vision prevailed barely. As the board members filed out, Sarah lingered. Once they were alone, she closed the door carefully. "Mr. Mason, there's something you need to know about Victor's investigation." William sat heavily in his chair, exhaustion finally showing on his face. "He's discovered something about Sarah's identity, hasn't he?" Sarah nodded, her professional mask slipping slightly. "Not just about me. He's hired private investigators to look into Amanda's disappearance, into Michelle's background. He's getting close to connections we can't afford him to make." "Tell me everything," William commanded softly. "No more secrets, Sarah. Who are you really?" Sarah, or whoever she really was, took a deep breath. "I'm Amanda's sister. Elizabeth wasn't just your wife, she was our oldest sister. The night of her accident, it wasn't just a drunk driver, William. And now the same people who were responsible are getting too close to the twins." The revelation hit William like a physical blow. He looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and saw the family resemblance he'd been subconsciously avoiding. The same graceful movements as Elizabeth, the same determined set of the jaw as Amanda. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered. "Because knowing would have put you in danger," Sarah replied. "Just like it put Amanda in danger when she discovered the truth about Elizabeth's death. Just like it's putting those babies in danger now." The pieces were falling into place: the bloody letter, the silver bracelet, Amanda's hasty marriage to Michelle, her subsequent disappearance. What had seemed like individual tragedies were revealing themselves as connected threads in a larger, darker tapestry. Victor, William breathed. "He's working with them, isn't he?" Sarah nodded grimly. "He's always been more than just a board member, William. He's part of something bigger, something that Elizabeth was investigating before she died. Something that Amanda found evidence of, forcing her to hide the twins with you, the one person she knew could protect them." William stood, moving to the window. The city sprawled below, its gleaming surfaces hiding countless shadows. Everything he'd believed about his past was shifting, revealing new depths of conspiracy and danger. But one thing remained crystal clear: he would protect those children, no matter the cost. "We need a plan," he said finally, turning back to Sarah. "And I need to know everything about Elizabeth's death, about Amanda's discovery, about the real reason those twins were left in my care." Sarah pulled out a USB drive from her pocket. "It's all here. Elizabeth's research, Amanda's evidence, everything. But William," she hesitated, "once you see this, there's no going back. Are you ready for what it might mean?" William thought of the twins at home, of the bracelet that had brought them to him, of the family he'd lost and the one he was building. "I've been hiding from the truth for 5 years," he said quietly. "It's time to face it for Elizabeth, for Amanda, and for those children." As Sarah inserted the drive into his laptop, William steeled himself for revelations that would shake the foundations of everything he'd built. The corporate battle had been just the beginning; the real war was about to begin. The transition from ruthless CEO to single father hit William with the force of a tidal wave. Each day brought new challenges that no amount of business acumen could prepare him for. The twins, now officially named Jack and Lily Mason, demanded a kind of attention that spreadsheets and quarterly reports had never required. Mornings became a careful orchestration of bottles, diapers, and attempted schedule keeping. William found himself trading his perfectly pressed suits for clothes that could withstand baby spit up and sticky fingers. The mansion's pristine silence gave way to a symphony of cries, giggles, and the constant hum of activity. Mr. Mason, Sarah would say, trying to hide her amusement as she watched him struggle with baby clothes, perhaps if you approached it like a merger negotiation, systematic and strategic. But babies, William discovered, didn't follow strategic plans. They operated on their own mysterious timetable, demanding attention at the most inconvenient moments. Conference calls were interrupted by crying fits, important documents gained tiny handprints, and his once immaculate office became a makeshift nursery. The staff, initially bewildered by the change in their employer, gradually adapted to the new normal. The cook, Mrs. Chen, took particular delight in preparing special baby foods, while James, the usually stoic butler, was caught making silly faces at Lily during his rounds. Late one night, as William paced the nursery with a fussy Jack, he caught his reflection in the window. The man staring back at him was different from the Ice King of Wall Street, softer around the edges, with laugh lines beginning to appear around his eyes. Elizabeth's mural seemed to glow in the moonlight, and for the first time he felt she would approve of the man he was becoming. Mason Enterprises underwent its own transformation. The implementation of family-friendly policies sent ripples through the corporate world. William converted an entire floor into a state-of-the-art childcare facility, complete with qualified staff and security measures that rivaled Fort Knox. "This is revolutionary," Dr. Harris commented during a tour of the facility. "You're not just changing policies, William, you're changing corporate culture at its core." The media's attention shifted from scandal to innovation. Mason Enterprises leads family-first revolution, declared the Wall Street Journal. Companies began calling, wanting to learn more about implementing similar programs. Even Victor, though still opposed, couldn't argue with the positive press and increasing productivity numbers. William brought the twins to the office occasionally, their presence softening even the most hardened executives. Lily's infectious laugh during a particularly tense board meeting once dissolved an argument that had been brewing for weeks. Jack's determined crawling adventures through the executive floor became legendary among the staff. But adapting to fatherhood wasn't all heartwarming moments and corporate breakthroughs. William struggled with the emotional demands of parenting. Years of suppressing his feelings made it difficult to express the love that grew stronger each day. He found himself studying parenting books with the same intensity he once reserved for market analyses. Sarah, now revealed as Aunt Sarah to the twins, proved invaluable during these times. She seemed to instinctively understand both the children's needs and William's struggles. "They don't need perfection," she would remind him gently. "They just need your love and presence." Sarah's true identity as the twins' aunt added layers of complexity to their daily interactions. While maintaining professional boundaries at work, she spent evenings teaching William the finer points of childcare, sharing stories about Elizabeth and Amanda that helped him understand the family he'd married into. "Elizabeth always said you had a big heart," Sarah remarked one evening, watching William read a bedtime story to the twins. "She knew that someday something would break through those walls you built." William absorbed these insights like precious gifts, pieces of Elizabeth he could share with their niece and nephew. Yet each revelation also brought questions about Amanda's current situation and the dangers that had forced her to leave her children. The corporate culture shifts rippled through every level of Mason Enterprises. The once sterile hallways now occasionally echoed with children's laughter from the daycare center. Employees began sharing family photos on their desks, speaking openly about work-life balance. The change was most noticeable in productivity and retention rates, both soaring beyond projections. "It's like a different company," one veteran employee commented during a town hall meeting. "For the first time, I feel like I can be both a good parent and a good employee." Yet beneath these positive changes, Victor's investigation cast a growing shadow. His private investigators became increasingly bold, photographing the twins during their rare public outings, questioning staff about Sarah's background, digging into Elizabeth's accident. William caught glimpses of suspicious vehicles outside the mansion, noticed unfamiliar faces lingering near the twins' favorite park. Sarah's warnings about Michel's true nature and the danger he represented grew more urgent. "He's getting closer," Sarah whispered one day, after spotting another investigator near the daycare center. "Michel has resources we didn't anticipate. The evidence Elizabeth gathered, it goes deeper than we thought." The first real warning came in the form of a nanny application. The candidate's credentials were impeccable, references stellar, but Sarah's careful background check revealed connections to Michel's organization. They had been trying to plant someone inside the mansion. "They're not just looking for information anymore," Sarah said grimly, shredding the application. "They want access to the twins." William doubled security measures, installed additional cameras, restricted access to the children to a handful of trusted staff. The mansion began to feel like a fortress again, but this time it protected something far more precious than his solitude. Jack and Lily, blissfully unaware of the growing tension, continued to thrive. Jack took his first steps in William's home office, toddling determinedly toward his father's desk while board members watched on video conference, breaking into spontaneous applause. Lily spoke her first word, "Dada," during a tense security briefing, instantly dissolving William's stress. These moments of joy were increasingly punctuated by glimpses of the danger lurking at the edges of their lives. A teddy bear delivered anonymously to the mansion contained surveillance equipment. A routine background check on a potential investor revealed ties to Michel's network. Elizabeth was investigating corruption at the highest levels, Sarah explained late one night after the twins were asleep. Corporate fraud, money laundering, connections to organized crime. Michel wasn't just Amanda's husband, he was a fixer for the organization. When Elizabeth got too close, the implications hung heavy in the air. William thought of his wife's accident, of Amanda's desperate choice to leave her children with him, of the growing web of conspiracy threatening to entangle them all. "We need to be ready," he said finally. "If they're getting bold enough to try infiltrating the mansion, they'll make a direct move soon." Sarah nodded grimly. The USB drive contains enough evidence to expose everything, but using it would put the twins at risk. Michel's organization. They don't leave loose ends. William watched the security feeds showing his sleeping children, their small forms peaceful despite the danger surrounding them. The businessman in him calculated risks and strategies, but the father in him felt a primal need to protect that overwhelmed all logical consideration. "Then we'll have to be smarter," he declared. "Use their tactics against them. Let Victor think his investigation is succeeding while we prepare our counterattack." As if fate was listening, Lily chose that moment to cry out in her sleep. William rushed to comfort her, gathering her tiny form in his arms. As she settled back to sleep, clutching his finger with surprising strength, he made a silent vow. He would not let history repeat itself. He would not lose another family to the shadows that had claimed Elizabeth. The game was changing, the stakes rising. William Mason, once known for his cold efficiency, now had something worth fighting for, something worth dying for. The real question was, would it be enough to keep his newfound family safe from the storm gathering on the horizon? Victor Goodman stood at the front of the boardroom, a triumphant gleam in his eyes as he distributed thick folders to each board member. The morning sun cast long shadows across the mahogany table, creating an appropriately dramatic atmosphere for what he clearly believed would be his moment of victory. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Victor began, his voice dripping with false concern, "what I'm about to share will be difficult to hear, but as custodians of Mason Enterprises' legacy, we must face facts." William sat quietly, his expression neutral despite the storm raging inside him. He'd been expecting this move, had prepared for it, but the reality of facing it still sent ice through his veins. "Our CEO's judgment has not only been compromised by his domestic situation," Victor continued, gesturing for everyone to open their folders, "but I've uncovered evidence suggesting the entire adoption may be part of a larger criminal enterprise. Photographs spilled across the table, surveillance shots of Sarah meeting with mysterious figures, documents suggesting financial irregularities, and most damaging, what appeared to be proof that Amanda had been involved in illegal activities before disappearing. The children's mother, Victor, announced with theatrical gravity, was under investigation for corporate espionage and fraud. Their appearance at Mr. Mason's door was no coincidence. It was a calculated move to infiltrate our organization. The boardroom erupted in murmurs. Dr. Harris studied the documents with a frown, while other board members whispered urgently to each other. William felt their eyes on him, searching for signs of guilt or deception. Furthermore, Victor pressed his advantage. Mr. Mason's sudden interest in family-friendly policies has cost us significantly. Our stock has dipped, valuable contracts have been delayed, and our reputation for excellence is being replaced by what one analyst called corporate softness. William finally stood, his movement silencing the room. He walked to the window, remembering a similar moment weeks ago when he'd first defended his changes to the company. But now the stakes were infinitely higher. "Victor," he said quietly, not turning around, "did your investigators happen to look into Flight 237 to Geneva last year? Or perhaps the Cayman Islands transfers that coincidentally occurred right after Elizabeth's accident?" He heard Victor's sharp intake of breath, saw the reflection of his face paling in the window. William turned slowly, meeting the older man's gaze with steel in his own. "While you've been investigating my family, others have been investigating yours," William continued, nodding to Sarah, who entered with her own set of folders. "Shall we discuss what they found?" Sarah distributed the new documents efficiently, her movements precise and controlled. The board members' expressions changed as they reviewed the contents, confusion turning to shock, then to anger. "This is preposterous," Victor sputtered, but his confidence was cracking. "These documents are clearly fabricated." "Like the ones you just presented," William interrupted smoothly. "The difference is, mine are authenticated by 3 independent forensic accountants. Would you like to explain to the board why shell companies connected to your private accounts received millions in untraceable funds the day after my wife died?" The room fell deathly silent. Dr. Harris removed her glasses slowly, fixing Victor with a penetrating stare. "Mr. Goodman, is this true?" Victor's composure crumbled. "You don't understand," he began, sweat beading on his forehead. "The organization they have reached beyond anything you can imagine. I had no choice." "There's always a choice," William cut in, his voice hard. "Elizabeth believed that. She died because she chose to expose the truth rather than look the other way. And now you're working with the same people who killed her, trying to gain access to her niece and nephew." Several board members gasped. Victor backed toward the door, but security personnel were already entering, their expressions grim. "The FBI has some questions for you," Victor Sarah announced calmly. "About Elizabeth's accident, about your offshore accounts, and about your connections to certain criminal enterprises. They're particularly interested in your relationship with a man named Michel." William walked to his old adversary, stopping inches from his face. "You thought you could use my children as leverage? Threaten my family again?" "You forgot something crucial, Victor. I learned ruthlessness from the best, but I also learned love from Elizabeth. That combination makes me far more dangerous than you could imagine." The security team led Victor away, his threats and protestations fading down the hallway. William turned back to the stunned board members, his demeanor shifting from avenging angel back to composed CEO. "Ladies and gentlemen," he addressed them, "I apologize for the drama, but it was necessary to expose the real threat to our company. Victor's corruption runs deep, and rooting it out will take time. However," he smiled slightly, "I believe you'll find our Q3 numbers more than compensate for any temporary market uncertainty." Dr. Harris stood, speaking for the group. "William, I think I speak for everyone when I say we owe you an apology. We let ourselves be swayed by Victor's insinuations, forgot the values this company was built on." William nodded in acknowledgement, but his mind was already racing ahead. Victor's arrest was just the beginning, Michelle and his organization would retaliate. The real battle for his family's safety was still to come. As the board members filed out, Sarah approached with a concerned expression. "They'll come after us now," she warned quietly. "Michelle won't take this lying down." "I know," William replied, gathering his papers, "but now we have breathing room to prepare. Have you confirmed the safe house arrangements?" Sarah nodded. "Everything's ready." "But William," she hesitated, "there's something else you need to know. Amanda made contact." William's head snapped up. "When?" "This morning. She says Michelle knows about the evidence, about everything. She's warning us they're planning something big." William thought of the twins at home, probably napping under Mrs. Chen's watchful eye. Every protective instinct in him screamed to rush back to them, but he forced himself to think strategically. Increased security at the mansion, he ordered. No one in or out without triple verification. And Sarah, he caught her arm as she turned to leave. "Thank you for everything." She smiled sadly. "They're my family too, William. We'll protect them together." As he gathered his things to head home, William touched the silver bracelet in his pocket, his connection to Elizabeth, to the past, and to the future he was fighting to protect. The corporate battle had been won, but the war for his family's safety was far from over. The first signs were subtle: Lily's unusual fatigue, her diminished appetite. William initially attributed it to a growth phase, but Sarah's worried glances told him something wasn't right. It was during a quiet Sunday morning after church, where he had started taking the twins in memory of Elizabeth's deep faith, that he noticed the bruises on Lily's legs. "They just appeared," Mrs. Chen explained, wringing her hands anxiously. "I swear I've been watching her carefully, Mr. Mason." The pediatrician's office was a blur of tests and concerned murmurs. William sat in the sterile examination room, Lily's tiny hand clutched in his, praying for the first time since Elizabeth's death. The crucifix on the wall seemed to watch over them as they waited. "Mr. Mason," Dr. Roberts began carefully, her expression grave. "Lily's blood work shows some concerning abnormalities. We need to run more specialized tests, but the preliminary results suggest." The words that followed, "acute lymphoblastic leukemia," hit William like physical blows. He listened in a daze as Dr. Roberts explained treatment options, success rates, and next steps. Through it all, Lily sat quietly in his lap, playing with the silver bracelet she'd worn since the night she arrived at his door. "Daddy," she whispered as they left the hospital, "why was the doctor lady so sad?" William fought back tears, remembering how Elizabeth had always said God never gives us more than we can handle. Sometimes, princess, he managed, angels need extra help to get stronger. Back at the mansion, Sarah took charge of Jack while William made calls. The finest oncologists were consulted, treatment plans were developed, and the pediatric wing of the city's best hospital was prepared for their arrival. Money opened doors, but William knew some things couldn't be bought like a perfect bone marrow match. "We need to test everyone," he declared, pacing his study where Elizabeth's photo seemed to watch over their crisis. "Family members have the best chance of matching. Sarah, we need to find Amanda." Sarah's face paled. "William, finding her means exposing her to Michelle. The danger." "I don't care about danger anymore," his shout echoed through the room, making them both wince. More quietly, he added, "This is Lily's life we're talking about. God brought these children to me. I have to believe he has a plan to save her." That night, after the twins were asleep, William found himself in the mansion's small chapel, a room Elizabeth had insisted on including in the design. The space had gathered dust since her death, but now he knelt before the altar, the moonlight filtering through stained glass, casting colored shadows around him. "I know I haven't been here in a while," he whispered, fingers tracing the familiar pattern of Lily's bracelet. "I've been angry, lost. But please don't punish her for my lack of faith. She's innocent. If you need to take someone, take me instead." Tears fell freely as he prayed, years of suppressed grief mixing with fresh fear. In the quiet sanctuary he felt Elizabeth's presence stronger than ever, as if she were kneeling beside him, lending him strength. The small golden cross she'd always worn, now kept in his desk drawer, seemed to burn in his mind. The chapel door creaked open softly, and Sarah's voice broke through his reverie. "William," she said gently, "there's something else you need to know about the bracelets, about why Elizabeth designed that pattern, and what it really means for Lily's chance of survival." Sarah's revelation in the chapel's dim light added another layer to their mounting crisis. "Elizabeth didn't just design that pattern," she explained softly, sitting beside William in the pew. "It was based on our family's genetic pattern, a medical alert bracelet disguised as jewelry. She wore it because of a rare blood condition that runs in our family." The implications hit William like a thunderbolt. If Lily had inherited this genetic marker, it would significantly complicate finding a donor. The medical team confirmed his fears the next day. Lily's specific genetic makeup meant a sibling or parent would be the only viable matches. The search for a bone marrow donor became increasingly desperate. Jack was tested first, but wasn't a match. William's results came back negative. Each dead end felt like another door closing, another prayer unanswered. "We need Amanda," William insisted during a late-night strategy session with Sarah. "She's Lily's mother, she has to be tested." Sarah looked torn, her fingers nervously touching the cross necklace she wore, a gift from Elizabeth years ago. "Finding Amanda means exposing her to Michelle. We'd be putting everyone at risk." "Then we'll protect her," William's voice was firm. "God brought these children into my life for a reason. I have to believe he'll show us a way through this." The hospital became their second home. William split his time between Lily's bedside and the mansion, where Jack struggled to understand why his sister wasn't home. The boy had taken to sleeping with Lily's favorite stuffed angel, insisting it would help keep her safe. Late one night, as William sat in the hospital chapel, he heard familiar footsteps. Dr. Harris stood in the doorway, her usual professional demeanor softened by concern. "I remember Elizabeth spending hours in our hospital chapel," she said quietly, joining him on the bench. "She always said faith wasn't just about believing in miracles, it was about finding strength to face whatever comes." William nodded, touching the small cross in his pocket, Elizabeth's last gift to him. "I couldn't understand her faith then," he admitted. "But now, watching Lily fight with such grace, I'm starting to." Dr. Harris hesitated before speaking again. "William, there's something else. Years ago, Elizabeth participated in a genetic study. Her tissue samples are still preserved in our research facility, given the unique markers we're looking for." Hope flared in William's chest, but medical reality quickly dampened it. The samples would be too degraded, the risks too high. Yet another dead end in their desperate search for a match. The days blurred together, marked by blood tests, treatments, and endless prayers. Lily's strength began to fade, her once bright spirit dimmed by medication and pain. Yet she never complained, facing each procedure with a courage that brought nurses to tears. "Daddy," she whispered one evening, her small hand tracing the pattern on her bracelet, "I saw Mummy Elizabeth in my dream. She was wearing a pretty bracelet like mine." William's heart clenched. They'd shown Lily pictures of Elizabeth, explained that she was watching over them from heaven, but this was the first time she'd mentioned dreaming of her. "She said not to be scared," Lily continued drowsily. "She said Mommy Amanda is coming to help make me better." Before William could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the hospital wing. Security alerts flashed on his phone. There had been a breach at the mansion. Jack was safe, but 2 armed men had been apprehended trying to scale the perimeter wall. Michelle was making his move, using Lily's illness as an opportunity to strike. The message was clear: if they tried to find Amanda, the consequences would be severe. In the chapel that night, William faced the hardest decision of his life. Finding Amanda might save Lily, but it could put everyone else at risk. The soft light from the stained glass windows fell across the altar, reminding him of Elizabeth's unwavering faith in the face of her own battles. "Show me the way," he whispered, clutching Elizabeth's cross. "Give me the strength to protect them all." As if in answer, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The text contained just 4 words, but they changed everything. "Faith without works is dead." It was Amanda's favorite Bible verse. She was reaching out, ready to risk everything to save her daughter. Now William had to find a way to protect both his dying child and the mother who'd sacrificed everything to keep her safe. Looking up at the crucifix, William made his choice. Sometimes, he realized, the greatest act of faith was being willing to risk everything for love. Elizabeth had taught him that, and now Lily was teaching him again. Tomorrow they would begin the dangerous game of bringing Amanda home. But tonight, in the quiet chapel, William finally understood what Elizabeth had always known, that love, faith and courage were all part of the same divine mystery, guiding them through their darkest hours toward the light of hope. The first message arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered to William's private office at Mason Enterprises. A plain white envelope, hand-delivered, containing only a photograph Jack and Lily playing in the mansion's garden, taken from an angle that suggested the photographer had been inside the security perimeter. On the back, written in red ink, "Children shouldn't pay for their parents' sins." William's hands shook as he called security, but he already knew what they would find: no fingerprints, no surveillance footage of the delivery. The threat was clear. Michelle could reach them whenever he wanted. Sarah burst into the office minutes later, her face ashen. "They're targeting the school," she said without preamble. 3 men were spotted watching Jack's classroom. The security team intercepted them, but they escaped. William immediately activated the emergency protocols they'd developed. Jack was quietly moved to the mansion's secure wing, his classes temporarily shifted to home tutoring. But the psychological damage was done. The boy's safe world had been shattered. "Why can't I go to school anymore?" Daddy Jack asked that evening, his small voice trembling. "Is it because of the bad men Tommy's mom talked about?" William gathered his son close, heart aching at the fear in those innocent eyes. "Sometimes, buddy, we have to be extra careful, but I promise you're safe. No one will hurt you." But the threats escalated. Photos appeared daily: the twins at their doctor's appointments, Sarah entering her apartment, William in supposedly secure locations. Each image carried the same message: nowhere was truly safe. Then came the video call. William was in the hospital with Lily when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. On the screen, Amanda's face appeared bruised but defiant. "But Will," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. They found me. Michelle, he knows everything. He's coming for the children." The call cut off abruptly, but not before William caught a glimpse of Michelle in the background, the man who had destroyed so many lives, finally showing his face. Sarah's network of contacts confirmed the worst. Michelle had been systematically eliminating everyone who knew about his organization's connection to Elizabeth's death. Now, with Amanda in his custody, he was ready to silence the last remaining witnesses. "We need to move them," Sarah insisted during a midnight strategy session. "The safe house in Montana." Her words were cut off by the mansion's security alarms. Multiple breaches, all sectors. This wasn't a warning, it was an assault. William rushed to the children's wing, heart pounding. Jack's room was empty, the window broken. On the bed lay a silver bracelet identical to Lily's with a note: "A family reunion is long overdue." The next hours were a blur of police reports, security footage, ransom demands. Michelle's message was simple: the evidence Elizabeth had gathered, everything Sarah had protected, in exchange for Jack's life. Sarah worked her contacts frantically, while William maintained his public calm, knowing they were being watched. But inside he was breaking. One child fighting for her life in the hospital, another in the hands of a murderer. Then came the final twisted text from Amanda, Church of the Holy Cross. Midnight. Come alone or Jack dies. Bring the evidence." William stared at the phone, remembering another message from years ago, the night Elizabeth died. The same church, the same ultimatum. History was repeating itself, but this time he wouldn't let evil win. "It's a trap," Sarah warned, but William was already moving. "Of course it is," he replied grimly. "But this time we're ready for them." The night air was thick with tension as William approached the church steps, briefcase in hand. Above him, the stone angels seemed to watch with solemn eyes, witnesses to another chapter in this twisted family saga. Inside, Jack's frightened whimpers echoed off ancient walls. Michelle stood at the altar, Amanda beside him, her face a mask of despair. And there, clutched in Michelle's grip, was William's son, a pawn in a game that had begun long before his birth. "The evidence," Michelle demanded. "All of it." William stepped forward, moonlight streaming through stained glass windows, casting shadows across his face. "First, let my son go." But even as the words left his mouth, he knew this wasn't going to end with a simple exchange. The game was far from over, and its most shocking revelations were yet to come. The hospital corridor echoed with the urgent footsteps of medical staff as Lily's condition suddenly deteriorated. William, torn between two crises, stood in the doorway of her room, watching the doctors work frantically to stabilize her failing body. Sarah's urgent text about Jack's situation at the church burned in his pocket, but here his daughter's life hung by a thread. "Mr. Mason," Dr. Roberts called out, her voice tense. "We need to make a decision now. The experimental treatment, it's risky, but without immediate intervention." The unspoken words hung heavy in the air. Without Amanda's bone marrow donation, they were running out of options. The timing couldn't have been worse. His son held hostage, his daughter failing, and somewhere in between, the truth about Elizabeth's death waiting to be unveiled. "Do whatever you need to do," William commanded, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart. "Keep her alive. I'm bringing her mother home tonight." As he rushed toward the church, William's phone buzzed with updates from the tactical team Sarah had positioned around the building. Michelle had brought 6 armed men, but hadn't spotted their surveillance. They had one chance to get this right. The church loomed before him, its Gothic architecture casting menacing shadows in the moonlight. Through the stained glass windows, he could see movement figures positioning themselves among the pews. Jack's muffled cries carried through the heavy wooden doors. William touched Elizabeth's cross in his pocket, drew a deep breath, and pushed open the doors. The scene inside was exactly as he'd feared. Michelle at the altar, using Jack as a human shield, Amanda beside them with a gun pressed to her ribs, and armed men stationed throughout the church. "The prodigal father arrives," Michelle's voice dripped with mockery. "I trust you brought what I asked for." William held up the briefcase containing Elizabeth's evidence. "It's all here, everything she discovered about your organization, every transaction, every murder." He took a step forward, "including the proof that you orchestrated her accident." Michelle's smile didn't waver, but his grip on Jack tightened, making the boy whimper. "You know, William, Elizabeth was a lot like you, too righteous for her own good. She thought exposing our operation would bring justice. Instead, it brought her death." "Let my son go," William's voice carried the authority that had built his empire. "Your quarrel is with me." "Oh, but it's so much more than that," Michelle laughed. "You see, Elizabeth wasn't just investigating our organization. She found something far more damaging, something about the real ownership of Mason Enterprises." The revelation hit William like a physical blow. He glanced at Amanda, saw the truth in her tears. All these years he'd thought he knew the full scope of Elizabeth's investigation, but there had been more secrets that had died with her on that rainy night. The tension in the church reached a breaking point. Jack's frightened eyes met his father's, silently pleading for rescue. Amanda's hands trembled as she watched the scene unfold. And somewhere in the hospital, Lily fought for her life, unaware that her family's fate hung in the balance. Your precious company." Michel continued, his voice echoing through the sacred space, "was built on blood money. Victor wasn't just my associate, he was laundering funds through Mason Enterprises long before you took control." Elizabeth discovered the paper trail, traced it back to its source. She was going to expose everything, destroy the empire you thought you built. William processed this information, his mind racing. The years of strange financial discrepancies, the board's inexplicable resistance to transparency initiatives, Victor's desperate attempts to maintain control, it all made terrible sense. Daddy Jack whimpered, struggling in Michel's grip. "I want to go home." Quiet Michel snapped, but his momentary focus on Jack gave William the opening he needed. He caught Sarah's subtle signal from the shadows behind a pillar their team was in position. "You're right about one thing," William said calmly, taking another step forward. "Elizabeth was righteous, she believed in justice, and she taught me that sometimes fighting for what's right means being willing to lose everything else." He opened the briefcase slowly. "That's why I've already sent copies of all this evidence to every major news outlet and law enforcement agency in the country." Michel's composure cracked. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" William smiled grimly. "Check your phone. The story should be breaking right about now." As if on cue, phones throughout the church began buzzing with news alerts. Michel's men shifted nervously, distracted by the incoming messages. It was the moment they'd been waiting for. Sarah's team moved with surgical precision. Smoke canisters rolled down the aisles, filling the church with controlled chaos. William launched himself forward as Michel's grip on Jack loosened, while Sarah's agents neutralized the armed men with practiced efficiency. Amanda, showing a strength William hadn't expected, drove her elbow into Michel's solar plexus, breaking free and grabbing Jack. William reached them just as Michel raised his gun, shielding his son with his body. The shot that rang out didn't come from Michel's weapon. Sarah stood at the side altar, her aim unwavering, as Michel crumpled to the ground, clutching his shoulder. "It's over," she declared, as her team secured the scene. "Michel's organization is exposed. The FBI is moving on their operations across the country. We got them, William." But victory came with a price. As the smoke cleared, they found Amanda collapsed near the altar steps, blood seeping through her shirt. A stray bullet had found its mark. "The hospital," she gasped, clutching William's hand. "Lily Lee needs me. The bone marrow." They rushed Amanda to the hospital, lights flashing through the night streets. Jack, traumatized but unharmed, clung to his father in the back of the ambulance, while Sarah coordinated with law enforcement to handle the aftermath at the church. The next hours were a blur of medical procedures. Amanda was stabilized, and despite her injury, insisted on proceeding with the bone marrow donation immediately. "I failed them so many times," she whispered as they prepared her for the procedure. "I won't fail Lily now." William divided his time between his children's rooms, watching over Jack's fitful sleep while monitoring Lily's response to the transplant. The waiting room filled with agents taking statements, board members demanding explanations, and reporters seeking comments, but he remained focused solely on his family. Sarah managed the crisis with her usual efficiency, working with the FBI to unravel decades of corporate corruption while protecting the legitimate parts of Mason Enterprises. The truth about Elizabeth's murder finally came to light, bringing both justice and closure. Days later, as Lily showed the first signs of improvement and Jack began to process his ordeal through play therapy, William sat with Amanda in her recovery room. The silver bracelet that had started everything lay between them on the hospital bed. "Elizabeth designed these as a way to protect us," Amanda explained weakly. "The pattern, it's not just decorative. It contains our family's medical history, coded into the design. She knew someday we might need that information to save someone we loved." William touched the familiar pattern, marveling at his late wife's foresight. Even in death, She had found a way to save their family. "What happens now?" Amanda asked quietly, watching Jack sleep in the chair beside her bed. William looked through the window toward Lily's room, where Sarah sat reading stories to his recovering daughter. The future was uncertain: corporate empires to rebuild, family bonds to repair, trust to restore. But for the first time since Elizabeth's death, he felt genuine hope. "Now," he said softly, "we heal. Together." As William sat in his study late one night, examining Elizabeth's bracelet under the soft lamplight, Sarah entered with a heavy manila envelope. Her expression was grave, suggesting that whatever she had discovered would shake their world yet again. "I've finished decoding Elizabeth's pattern," she said quietly, laying out a series of documents. "It wasn't just medical information she encoded in these bracelets, William. She left us a map, a trail leading to everything she had uncovered about Mason Enterprises' true origins." The documents revealed a story that stretched back decades. Mason Enterprises hadn't begun with William's innovative leadership or even his predecessor's work. It had started with Elizabeth's father, a man William had never met, who had supposedly died before Elizabeth was born. "He didn't die," Sarah explained, her voice tight with emotion. "He disappeared after discovering that his shipping company was being used by a criminal organization, the same organization that Michelle worked for, the same one that killed Elizabeth." William's hands trembled as he read through the evidence. Elizabeth's father had built the foundation of what would become Mason Enterprises, but when he threatened to expose the corruption, he was forced into hiding. The company had been taken over by the organization, cleaned up on the surface, but rotten at its core. Elizabeth knew, Sarah continued. She spent years gathering evidence, tracking the money, following her father's trail. When she met you, she saw an opportunity to reclaim what had been stolen from her family. She believed you could help her transform the company into what it was meant to be. The weight of this revelation pressed down on William's chest. All those years, his wife had been fighting a secret battle, trying to restore her family's legacy while protecting those she loved. "There's more." Sarah hesitated, then pulled out an old photograph. Elizabeth's father. He didn't stay hidden forever. William stared at the image, recognition dawning like a thunderbolt. The man in the photo, taken just months before Elizabeth's death, was someone he knew well, someone who had been watching over their family all along. "Dr. Harris," he whispered. "Evelyn Harris is." Sarah nodded. "Elizabeth's father. After years in hiding, he had returned disguised to help his daughter. But Michelle's organization discovered the truth. That's why Elizabeth had to act when she did. She knew they would kill him if she didn't move quickly enough." The revelation cast everything in a new light: Dr. Harris's unwavering support, her deep understanding of the company, her protective stance toward William and the twins. She hadn't just been a mentor, she had been watching over her family's legacy, continuing Elizabeth's fight from the shadows. "Does she know?" William asked, though he already suspected the answer. "About the twins, about Amanda?" "She knows everything," Sarah confirmed. "She's been helping protect them from the beginning. The secure wing at the hospital, the rapid approval of treatments for Lily. It wasn't just your influence making things happen." William sat back, overwhelmed by the layers of protection and sacrifice that had surrounded his family without his knowledge. Elizabeth had woven a web of guardians around them, preparing for the worst even as she fought for justice. The truth about Sarah's role emerged next, each revelation more startling than the last. She wasn't just Amanda's sister, she was Elizabeth's most trusted confidant, chosen specifically to protect William and guide him when the time came. Elizabeth knew they might kill her, Sarah explained, tears finally breaking through her professional demeanor. "She made me promise to watch over you, to help you find your way back to love if anything happened. When Amanda discovered she was pregnant with the twins, we knew they would need protection too." The pieces clicked into place: Sarah's inexplicable knowledge of childcare, her immediate bond with the twins, her tactical expertise during the crisis. She had been trained for this role, prepared by Elizabeth herself. Victor's involvement goes deeper than we thought, Sarah continued. He wasn't just working with Michelle's organization, he was Elizabeth's father's original business partner. When the organization took over, Victor betrayed him, chose power over loyalty. William stood, moving to the window where dawn was beginning to break over the city. The skyline of Mason Enterprises dominated the view, a legacy built on betrayal, redeemed through sacrifice and love. Dr. Harris Evelyn, he corrected himself, still adjusting to this new reality. She's been guiding the company back to its rightful path all along. The family-friendly policies, the emphasis on ethical business practices, she was helping me transform the company into what it was always meant to be. Sarah nodded. Elizabeth believed that true success came from building something that helped people, not just profits. She saw that same vision in you, even when you couldn't see it in yourself. The final piece of the puzzle was Michelle's real identity, not just Amanda's abusive husband or a criminal enforcer, but Elizabeth's half-brother born from her father's first marriage. His hatred had been personal, driven by jealousy over the empire he felt should have been his. The family connection is why he was able to track everything so effectively, Sarah explained. He knew how Elizabeth thought, knew where to look for the evidence she left behind. The twins weren't just leverage, they were his way of claiming what he saw as his birthright. As the sun rose fully over the city, William felt the weight of these revelations settling into place. The company he'd thought he built from nothing had actually been guided by unseen hands, protected by a network of guardians who believed in Elizabeth's vision of ethical business and true family values. "What do we do now?" he asked quietly, touching the bracelet that had started this journey of discovery. Sarah smiled softly. "We do what Elizabeth would have wanted. We build something worthy of all these sacrifices. We create the legacy she always dreamed of, for her children and for future generations." William nodded, understanding at last the true meaning of success. It wasn't measured in profit margins or market share, but in the lives touched and the values upheld. Elizabeth had known this all along, and now, finally, he did too. The morning light caught the pattern on the bracelet, sending familiar shadows dancing across the wall. But now those shadows told a story of love, sacrifice, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds of family, both chosen and born. The hospital room was filled with soft morning light as Lily opened her eyes for the first time since the bone marrow transplant. William, who had barely left her side, watched in tearful joy as his daughter's face regained its color, her smile brightening the sterile space. "Daddy," she whispered, her small hand reaching for his. "I saw Mummy Elizabeth again in my dreams. She was holding hands with Grandma Evelyn." William exchanged glances with Dr. Harris, now known to him as Elizabeth's father, who stood quietly in the corner, medical charts forgotten in her hands. The moment was heavy with unspoken emotion, generations of love and sacrifice converging in this simple scene. "She's always watching over us," Princess William replied softly, stroking Lily's hair. "And now we have even more angels guarding our family." In the adjacent bed, Amanda was recovering from both her gunshot wound and the bone marrow donation. Jack sat between the beds, holding his sister's hand while leaning against his birth mother's side. The scene would have seemed impossible just weeks ago, this blending of past and present, of chosen and biological family. Sarah entered with coffee and news from Mason Enterprises. The company was undergoing its own healing process, emerging stronger from the exposed corruption. The board had unanimously voted to support William's vision of ethical business practices, with Dr. Harris now openly acknowledged as the company's original founder, serving as special advisor. "The media's calling it the greatest corporate transformation in history," Sarah reported, but her eyes were on the children. Business success seemed secondary to the miracle of family reunion unfolding before them. The recovery process was gradual but steady. As Lily regained strength, the family began to forge new bonds and heal old wounds. Amanda, no longer hiding in fear, shared stories of her early life with Elizabeth, helping the twins connect with the aunt they'd never known but who had saved their lives in more ways than one. William watched his expanding family with wonder. Dr. Harris, whom the twins now called Grandpa with natural ease, brought decades of wisdom and tender care to their lives. The distinguished businessman shed tears the first time Lily crawled into his lap for a story, her silver bracelet catching the light just as Elizabeth's once had. During quiet moments in the hospital room, William often found himself deep in conversation with Amanda, both of them working through grief, guilt, and gradual forgiveness. They shared memories of Elizabeth, filling in gaps in each other's understanding, creating a fuller picture of the remarkable woman who had brought them all together. She would have loved this, Amanda said one evening, watching Jack teach his grandfather a complicated handshake while Lily giggled from her bed. Elizabeth always believed in the power of family, not just blood, but the family we choose and build. The bonds within the family continued to strengthen as they all worked through their individual healing processes. Sarah, now openly embracing her role as aunt, spent hours teaching Jack and Lily about their family history, carefully weaving together the complex tapestry of their past. The silver bracelets became symbols not of secrets, but of connection and protection. Family isn't just about DNA, William explained to the twins one evening as they sat in the mansion's newly renovated family room. It's about love, choice, and sometimes forgiveness. The room, once a stark symbol of his isolation, now buzzed with life and warmth. Mason Enterprises underwent its own transformation. The corporate headquarters, once cold and imposing, was redesigned to reflect the company's new values. The child care center expanded, and family-friendly policies became the standard against which other companies measured themselves. Dr. Harris, now embracing both his role as grandfather and company founder, worked tirelessly to implement Elizabeth's vision. This is what she always wanted, he told William during a quiet moment. A company that measures success not just in profits but in lives improved. But the media storm eventually subsided, replaced by stories of corporate redemption and family reconciliation. William's journey from Ice King to compassionate leader became a case study in business schools, though few knew the full story of sacrifice and love that had driven the change. Amanda's recovery brought new dimensions to their family dynamic. As she regained strength, she found her own role not replacing William as the twins' parent, but adding another layer of love to their lives. Her artistic talent, suppressed during her years in hiding, emerged in the murals she painted for the children's rooms, each one incorporating Elizabeth's bracelet pattern in subtle ways. I used to paint to escape, she explained to William as they admired her work. Now I paint to remember, to heal, to connect. The mansion, once a fortress of solitude, became a true home. Sunday dinners became a tradition, with Dr. Harris sharing stories of Elizabeth's childhood, while Sarah and Amanda added their own memories. The twins soaked up these tales, building a connection to the aunt who had protected them before they were born. William found himself learning to balance his role: CEO, father, family anchor. The lessons Elizabeth had tried to teach him about love and business finally made sense. Success wasn't about control or power, it was about creating something meaningful, something that would outlast him. The company's ethical transformation rippled through the business world. Other corporations began following their lead, recognizing that profit and compassion could coexist. The Mason Foundation, established in Elizabeth's memory, funded programs supporting families affected by corporate crime. "You've built something remarkable," Dr. Harris told William one evening, watching the twins play in the garden with their mother and aunt. "Not just the company, this family. Elizabeth would be proud." The final piece of healing came in the form of a memorial garden at Mason Enterprises. Centered around a fountain featuring 3 intertwined silver bands representing the bracelets that had connected their family, it served as a reminder of love's enduring power. Jack and Lily grew stronger, their bond deepened by shared experiences. They faced their trauma with the support of their expanded family, each member contributing to their healing. Jack's protective instincts toward his sister evolved into a gentle strength, while Lily's resilience inspired everyone around her. The future held new challenges, but now they faced them together. William no longer feared loving or losing. Elizabeth's sacrifice had taught him that love was always worth the risk. The family she had fought to protect had not only survived but flourished, becoming something more beautiful than any of them could have imagined. In quiet moments, William would still touch Elizabeth's bracelet, but now it brought comfort rather than pain. The pattern that had once seemed like a puzzle now read like a love letter, a message of hope, protection, and the enduring power of family bonds. As they gathered for a photo in the memorial garden, William, the twins, Amanda, Sarah, and Dr. Harris, the setting sun, caught their silver bracelets, creating a dance of light that seemed to embrace them all. In that moment, William felt Elizabeth's presence, not as a ghost of the past, but as the guardian angel who had led them all home. The story of the Mason family became more than a tale of corporate intrigue or personal redemption. It became a testament to the power of love to heal, to transform, and to build something beautiful from the ashes of loss. The legacy Elizabeth had fought for lived on, not just in the company that bore her family's name, but in the hearts of those she had brought together. And in the end, that was the greatest success story of all. In life's darkest moments, when all seems lost and our hearts are frozen in grief, love finds its way through the shadows. Elizabeth's story teaches us that true love transcends death itself. It lives on in the patterns we leave behind, in the lives we touch, and in the family we build, whether through blood or choice. Sometimes our greatest pain becomes our greatest purpose. William's journey from a man encased in ice to a father burning with love shows us that it's never too late to thaw a frozen heart. The walls we build to protect ourselves from pain can also keep out the very healing we need. The silver bracelets remind us that our legacy isn't found in corporate empires or material success, but in the invisible threads that connect our hearts. Every scar, every tear, every moment of sacrifice becomes a thread in the tapestry of love that binds us together. To those who feel broken, remember Lily's courage. To those who feel lost, remember Jack's resilience. To those who carry guilt, remember Amanda's redemption. And to those who think it's too late to change, remember William's transformation. We are all guardian angels in waiting, carrying patterns of love that others may need. Like Elizabeth, our greatest acts of love might only be understood long after we're gone. But every act of protection, every moment of sacrifice, every choice to love, despite the risk, these create ripples that touch generations. Through the depths of tragedy, the darkness of betrayal, and the winter of grief, love remains our compass. It guides us home, not to a place, but to each other. In the end, success isn't measured in the empires we build, but in the hearts we touch and the love we leave behind. Remember, God gives his hardest battles to his strongest soldiers, and sometimes what seems like our greatest loss becomes the foundation of our most beautiful redemption. In your darkest hour, look for the pattern, the invisible design of love that connects us all. For in that pattern, you'll find your way home. For in this tapestry of life, we are all connected by silver threads of love, sacrifice, and hope. And sometimes the most profound act of faith is simply opening our hearts to love again, knowing it might hurt, but believing that love in all its forms is always worth the risk. This isn't just William and Elizabeth's story. It's the story of every heart that's been broken and dared to love again. Of every parent who would move heaven and earth for their child. Of every person who's felt lost but found their way home through love. Remember, your story isn't over. Like the pattern on Elizabeth's bracelet, your life is weaving something beautiful, even if you can't see the full design yet. Trust in love, trust in family, both given and chosen. And most importantly, trust that even in your darkest night, dawn is coming, bringing with it the promise of healing, hope, and the endless possibility of love. For in the end, love is the only legacy that truly matters. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If this story touched your heart, please show your support by subscribing to our channel, hitting the like button, and sharing it with those you love. Your comments and feelings mean the world to us. Want to know what happens next? Let us know in the comments below. Every like, share, and subscription motivates us to bring you more touching stories like this. Together, let's continue creating moments that touch hearts.